Okay guys, I'm going to make this video for you now on how to finish the production log. It's really important. I want to remind you that production log goes on top of your project. It tells the story of the whole project from the beginning right until the end with the summary and reflection, okay? And it's what the examiner is going to read first. It's where a lot of the marking comes from, a lot of the assessment comes from, okay? So what are they looking for? They're looking for a person who, from their original ideas, has put together a really interesting project and they've learned loads over the course of the EPQ. Remember, we're talking about more than a year. So what they're looking for is that you're learning, you're picking up skills, you're evolving, you're problem solving, you're moving forward, okay? So I'm using Matthew Bradley's one here. He won't mind me naming him. From his record of initial ideas, if you look at Matthew's one, it might be different from yours because he knew pretty much from the beginning that he was really interested in sugar. So he got there straight away. For some of you, your initial ideas might be completely different. That's fine and even better in some ways, but I just want to remind you that you must be talking all of the time about your decisions, why you did them, backing it up with evidence, okay? So if you look at Matthew's here, which is on the SharePoint, you can have a look. Even from the initial ideas, I'd like you to make sure that you have some sources in there, that you show that you were doing reading and research right from the beginning. Now, Matthew was I was Matthew's supervisor, and we had a lot of really interesting talks. He was very good at documenting some of these talks, and very good at this box in particular, modifications I've made as a result of discussions with my supervisor. You must always fill those in, but don't forget, it shouldn't be my supervisor told me, it should be following a discussion. Remember, you're using the I all the time, and you're emphasizing your agency, aren't you? The candidate proposal should be quite detailed. It should have a kind of basic essay plan in it, showing that you've already thought about some of the sections and what it's going to look like. And you've thought about, is the research question answerable? Is there a debate at the center of it? Is there enough data and evidence? So they'll be looking to see this really carefully. And once again, that you've had a good talk with your supervisor and there's evidence of that. I'm going to move on to the next thing, which is the planning review. And we were just talking a moment ago about, do you need a Gantt chart? Well, it doesn't have to be a Gantt chart. But in the appendices, there must be some kind of calendar, and that calendar must have been looked at. In other words, ticked off, or the dates changed. They're going to look for evidence that it wasn't just a piece of decoration, that you had a proper project plan, that you'd broken it down into sections and smart targets, that you'd monitored it, that you have some recording of changing your dates and your ideas. That goes into the appendices, okay? You'll see here Matthew is fantastic at updating his project plan. So he'd already done one before, and here he discusses updating it, etc. He records some elements of the conversation that he had with me, and this idea of this Stanford marshmallow experiment that he's going to use. And he also records some of the changes that he's going to make. In his case, he's watching tutorials, and he's using crap analysis and Raven and things like that, okay? He also talks about how he's using a reference system, which he should do, what kind of note-taking he was doing, how was he recording his information, what he was doing for critical analysis and critical evaluation. All of this is in the production log. Then what do we look in the mid-project review? Mid-project review means you went back to your project. And when you write the mid-project review, it's when you've really made a detailed plan or when you've started writing. Because the key element of the mid-project review is that it's the final title and the title is locked. So you should have some kind of discussion there as to why you chose those words for the title in the end. Remember, after that, you can't change it. So in Matthew's case, he discusses how he tweaked the title and how we discussed it together, and how his planning has been going, and what skills he's picking up, and why he changed some things. One of the things that he did is he used software to create his own infographic, and he discusses that. So that's going to really score very highly in terms of things like creativity, decision making. So make sure that you are showing some of your own originality, your own kind of critical abilities, etc., all of the time, yeah? You'll see it allows me, marking it, to put down lots of grades, in particular AO1, which is the planning. Do you have clear objectives? Do you have a clear project plan? Do you know what it is you want to do? You need to show this very much, especially in that mid-project review, and to discuss your changes, as I say. To remind you, the project product review is when you get your feedback. This should be a detailed entry. This should be, I realized that there were lots of flaws in my first draft. Did my supervisor tell me everything? No, he or she didn't. They pointed out some things and I found them. Remember, that's the key thing. JCHQ says no supervisor is allowed to mark physically the draft. That's why I didn't mark any of your ones, did I? I only spoke to you and pointed out some errors for you. So when you're talking about in the mid-project, in the project product review, make it very clear that you reread your work and you saw some of the flaws. You used Grammarly. You realized that you lacked transitions. You realized that the argument wasn't very well structured, that you needed some mini conclusions. You realized that maybe there were errors with your referencing. And you discuss how you went about improving it and what you did and how you put more critical evaluation in, etc. It's very important that you make it very clear to the examiner that they were your improvements and not the improvements of your supervisor. Moving on then. In part A over here, it's very important that you discuss how you put your presentation together. How did you decide to make it interesting? What devices did you use for audience engagement? Show that you planned it really carefully and put the speech and your slides into the appendices. Everyone get it? Also show that you practiced it with a friend or with a supervisor and looked for improvements. That will be your grade going up under AO3, the problem solving, decision making, and AO4, which is the reflection, criticizing yourself and making yourself better. So you can see that Matthew does that very well. And here he tried out a practice presentation and then he put new things in. He also gave all of his audience lollipops, because it was about sugar and stuff. And then when they were all eating the lollipops, he started to tell them how bad sugar was. So it's kind of quite effective, isn't it? So make sure you discuss what devices you used. Part B is what your supervisors are filling in at the moment, okay? So we're all stressed on inspection week at the moment. Next week, I'm going to hit the supervisors and make sure that all of this goes into your production log. They need to record how well you answered questions. And if you look at me, I filled this in for Matthew. Even though I've done it in bullet points, I've shown that his answers were detailed and that he showed mastery over his subject, but also that he was a good talker. Remember, one of the key things about the presentation is that you were an effective public speaker. You delivered it well. You used visuals well, and you engaged your audience. You weren't boring, in other words, okay? Moving on then. This is the big one. On my YouTube channel, I've made a kind of half-an-hour video on this. Please watch it. Because what I've done is I've reminded you of the mark scheme and reminded you of the summary and reflection is your last chance to tell the examiner all of the things that you've learned. They give you guiding questions like, what skills have you learned? Put down everything that you've learned. If you've done an artifact, put down how you've learned soldering or welding or technical drawing or CAD or whatever it is. On the report, many of you have never written 5,000 words before, particularly if you don't do history or geography, if you've not done an NEA before. This will be your first piece of really extended writing. Talk about how you've learned about research and scholarship and referencing and what you've learned about yourself and your personality. And are you a procrastinator? Have you had to really motivate yourself, etc., okay? You also want to talk about what you found enjoyable. I hope a lot of you guys have enjoyed that it was your choice and that you had ownership over the project, yeah? You have to talk about the strengths. So find things you like about yourself, but have the maturity to critique yourself for AO4. We can all learn to be better, can't we? And you could talk about general things like the education system and the fact that you don't often get to choose what you want to study. The syllabus is set for you. How did you feel about having your own choices, etc.? And then, this is a nice one, where you can talk about advice you would give to other people who are undertaking the project. So, just to conclude, the production log will be the first thing that the examiners will look at. It will tell the story of the project, of the changes, the modifications. It should read like a kind of critical diary. Be completely honest about your weaknesses and your failings, but emphasize how you overcame difficulties, because you're hitting the mark scheme every time. So as I say, really emphasize your learning. When you finish the production log, you're going to download it. You can do that from Project Q, and then you have to sign it. And then the final thing I'm going to do is put all of your reports into Turnitin to check for plagiarism, and we will put a plagiarism report in with the EPQ so the folks in England know that we're not cheats. Okay, so I hope that that was useful. Thanks for listening.